My name is Michael Gallen and I'm the composer of Alltár, and I'm also one of the performers in the piece as a vocalist and pianist. In terms of the musical sound world, I grew up playing a mix of classical and traditional Irish music right on the Monaghan-South Armagh border, and my earliest memory is of the sound of helicopters. I was very interested in the sounds of my own childhood, this idea that at any point in our lives there are things both beautiful and terrible that can arrive from nowhere and divert what we think our course is. The piece is a co-commission from the Orchestra Nationale de Bretagne, the Ulster Orchestra and the National Symphony Orchestra in Dublin. I was approached about the piece after my opera Elsewhere premiered in 2021 by Mark Feldman, who was then the director of the orchestra in Brittany. And the idea from the outset was that it would be a piece for a symphony orchestra that had 4 soloists, and that the soloists would be traditional Irish musicians or singers. And I suppose the piece grew out of that. When the other commissioners came on board, it sort of expanded in scale. I think that when you look at the centuries when the majority of the population of this island didn't have the opportunity to frequent concert halls or opera houses, you can see that there's a finesse and a genius that's put into the practice of one person standing in front of a room and singing a song or telling a story or playing an instrument, and I suppose opening up this portal into another world. And I felt that that was something that I really wanted to feel strong in this piece, that there would be moments where you would just have a soloist and that the orchestral world would grow out of that, rather than the soloists and the orchestra being sort of, separate elements. So the piece begins with solo voice and it ends with a song that's sung, but particularly the beginning of the piece, which I sing myself. It was also a way for me, I suppose, to get the demons off my back when I was composing the piece and to feel that I could authentically, write from my own perspective and my own world. I think that there were probably several points of origin for the piece. So I suppose the title of the piece, Boad an Alltár, which means boat from the other world or from the otherness, has been there from quite early on in the piece's conception. When I was given this idea of working with 4 traditional Irish musicians in the piece, and including 2 sean-nós singers or traditional Irish singers, I became quite interested in the idea of working with a text in Old Irish as well as a contemporary text that would be co-written by myself and Anne Rainey Curran, who's a poet that I work with quite a lot in my work. And so we decided to have a look at the Dún Amargana, which is this origin poem of Celtic mythology, with the idea being that when the Celts arrived to the island of Ireland and it was sort of shrouded in mist, there were these waves that were sort of sent to push them away from the shore by the Tuatha Dé Danann, who are these spirit people who were there at the time. And that Amargan stands on the bow of the boat and he sings this sort of incantation of the human essence as being of nature. So he sort of invokes the power of nature in order to dispel this. I became interested in the text because it's a text of migration. Although it's given to us as a story of origin, actually these were people who were coming from a place that had a famine prior to that and were in need of a new land in order to seek their fortune. And I suppose in the spirit of the times when migration has become such an issue, around the world, but particularly, in the Mediterranean and for Europe, I thought it would be interesting to take that text but to deconstruct it. And so the piece is in 3 movements. It begins with the Dún Amargana, which is, as I say, this invocation of nature, but also has this sense of arrival. And the 3rd movement is also a song which is written from the perspective of the person who is left behind. And it's where the Dún Amargana is all about the abundance of nature and the power that's in it and how the human spirit can be linked to that. In the 3rd movement, it's, I suppose, an evocation of the land that has been abused or the land that can no longer give and that has to be left behind. And then the middle movement, which is instrumental and is much longer than the other 2, I suppose is it evokes a series of journeys, you know, and this idea of feeling like you're about to arrive at a certain place and then being diverted. It often happens with commissions of contemporary composers that the piece is performed once and then is shelved. So I feel very lucky. The piece has been performed 6 times in France so far, and that was in early 2024. So I've had a chance to revise the piece again, and just as it happens, the performance in Dublin will be different to the one in Belfast, because the one in Belfast there's a choir involved in the concert, so I've incorporated them into the orchestral piece. So although it's a lot of work for me, it's quite lovely that every iteration of the piece has had its own energy, and has had, I suppose, specificities to the place that it's being performed in. Obviously, I hope that it keeps on getting performed loads, but if, you know, these 3 co-commissioners are the 3 parts of the triangle of it being commissioned, they're all getting a very unique and different experience. So the concert in Belfast, which will be the last programmed concert of the piece for now, will be a very special one.